disabled black girl humiliated by bullies. Unaware she is a martial arts prodigy, they thought she was weak. It's just a girl in a chair. But behind that silence was a storm. And what they didn't. Snow was about to change everything she rolled through. The school gates with quiet wheels and steady hands. Her backpack clipped to the side of her chair, her eyes sharp but guarded. The morning sun hit the windows of Jefferson High just right, casting long shadows across the hallway floor as she moved past them. Lockers clanged open, laughter echoed in the air, and sneakers squeaked across linoleum. But when she entered, everything slowed. Eyes followed her sideways glances, half-lowered phones recording in silence, whispers shared between cupped hands. No one said a word to her directly. They didn't need to. Their silence carried weight, heavy and unkind. She navigated the hallway like a veteran, not because she was used to this place, she wasn't, but because she had long since learned how to move through the world like a ghost. The front office had called her name too loudly when she checked in. The woman behind the desk had over-enunciated every word, as if her being in a wheelchair somehow made her unable to understand. She hadn't responded to the patronizing tone. She never did. Her schedule was handed to her with a soft smile that didn't reach the woman's eyes. First period, history, room 103. She found it quickly, her fingers tracing the wall signs. When she entered, the classroom went quiet for a beat too long. The teacher, a man with glasses too large for his face, directed her to a seat at the front. Next to the whiteboard, she rolled forward without hesitation, ignoring the stares. The kids turning to whisper as she passed. As she positioned herself at the front, she could feel them sizing her up from behind. She knew what they saw not. Her face, not her mind, not her story, just the chair. A boundary, a label, a weakness. She stared ahead, eyes fixed on the board as the teacher began to drone on about early civilizations, his voice barely rising above the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Her hands remained folded in her lap, but her shoulders never sleut. At lunch, the cafeteria was chaos. Tables filled with clusters of kids who had known each other since middle school, laughing between bites, showing each other their phones, trading stories. She rolled past the food line, skipped the lunch tray, and moved toward an empty table in the far corner. But as she approached, 3 girls with identical red jackets slid into the seats before her. One of them locked eyes with her and gave a fake apology, tilting her head. "Oh, sorry, didn't see you," she said. Even though they both knew she had, she turned without a word, searching for another spot. Most tables were full. One girl, tall, thin, with bright eyes and a high ponytail, waved her over. A brief flicker of hope sparked in her chest. Maybe not everyone here was the same. She rolled toward the girl, who stood up dramatically and made a show of moving chairs aside. "Here, let me help you," the girl said sweetly, too sweetly. But then, just as she reached the open space, the girl gave the back of her wheelchair a sudden nudge, not hard enough to tip her, but enough to send her wheels into the side of a table. Her tray slipped, and her water bottle clattered to the ground. Laughter broke out from nearby tables. She didn't say anything. She never did. She picked up the bottle, adjusted her wheels, and backed away. That girl returned to her table like she'd done nothing at all, grinning with her friends as if it was all just harmless fun. But the girl in the chair didn't look back. She kept her head high, even as the back of her neck burned. The rest of the day passed in a blur, books being passed down rows that never reached her, group activities where she was left out without apology, and stairs she had to detour around. While students ran ahead of her, no one offered help. No one asked her name. By the final bell, she had moved through the day like a shadow again, silent, invisible, and underestimated. She wheeled herself home through quiet streets, each push of her arms as steady as a drumbeat. The world was quieter away from the school. No whispers, no laughter, no stares. Just the sound of birds, the hum of traffic in the distance, and the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. She reached her small house just as the sun began to dip behind the roofs, casting a warm orange across the sky. Inside, the walls were bare except for one thing, a single wooden shelf in her room. And on it, sat a worn gold medal. Its ribbon was faded, its edges dulled, but its presence still filled the room like fire. She stared at it for a long time, not with longing, not with regret, but with quiet memory. Her hands gripped the rims of her wheelchair tightly, muscles flexed, breath steady. Her arms were stronger than most people knew. Her silence was not weakness. It was practice. It was patience. It was discipline. She looked away from the medal and turned to the closet, sliding open the door. Inside, folded neatly on the top shelf, was a black uniform with creases so sharp it looked untouched. She didn't take it down, not yet, but her fingers lingered on the fabric before she closed the door again. Tomorrow would come, and the whispers would return with it. But tonight, in the quiet of her room, she remembered who she really was and what they would soon learn. She wasn't just a girl in a chair. She was something else entirely. The second day didn't bring anything new, only more of the same. But deeper, more eyes, more stares. The silent judgment had sharpened overnight. She rolled into the gymnasium for PE, her wheels clicking over the polished hardwood. The moment she entered, someone laughed. It wasn't loud, but loud enough. Class was already assembled, stretching, chatting in pairs. The coach, a gruff man with a whistle hanging from his neck like a relic, barked directions about warm-ups and team drills. He glanced at her, then looked away just as quickly as if unsure what to do with her presence. He never offered her an alternative activity. No inclusion, no respect. Just avoidance. She parked herself near the edge of the court, watching quietly. As the rest of the students jogged laps, a few of them stared as they passed, her smirking, murmuring behind their sleeves. A tall boy near the back slowed down just long enough to mimic a limp, dragging one leg dramatically as he passed her. His friends burst into laughter. She didn't react. That only made them laugh harder. Later, while basketballs thudded across the court, she remained on the sideline. She kept her posture upright, hands in her lap, eyes scanning the game. But behind her, something else was happening. A group of kids to girls and a boy stood just out of sight, holding up their phones and pretending to take selfies. But their lenses were aimed at her. They pulled faces, stuck out tongues pointed toward her chair. One girl bent over dramatically, clutching her stomach like the sight of her was just too much. The clicks and fake camera shutters echoed like slaps. She heard it. She knew. But she didn't turn around. She just stared ahead, jaw locked, heart still, after the class. As students moved into the locker rooms, the tall boy from earlier reappeared. This time, he approached her directly. He put on a fake smile and reached for the handle of her chair. "Let me help you, princess," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And before she could react, he yanked her chair backward in a theatrical gesture of assistance. The back wheels lifted off the ground. She tipped just for a second before slamming down again in Nona, jarring. Her hands grabbed the rims instinctively to steady herself. The room erupted in laughter. He stepped back, with his arms raised like it was all an accident. "Oops," he said, chuckling. The teacher turned briefly, raised an eyebrow, and then looked away. He didn't say a word. His silence was permission. It was a shrug dressed in authority. She heard it loud and clear. She wheeled herself into the hallway, toward the locker area where the accessible restroom was located. She passed rows of metal doors, flickering ceiling lights, and tiled floors still damp from leaking pipes. She paused for a moment near a bench to adjust the straps. On her band, that's when it happened. Someone behind her whispered something. Then her chair lurched to one side. Her left wheel was gone. She looked down. The entire wheel had been unscrewed and pulled off while her back was turned. She saw it rolling lazily across the hall, disappearing around a corner, followed by retreating laughter. Footsteps pounded away, fading into the distance. She was stranded alone. She didn't yell. She didn't call for help. Instead, she slowly bent forward, gripped the cold floor with her fingers, and pulled. One arm forward, one leg dragging behind, her chest nearly touching the tile. Every inch took effort. Her palms burned, her elbows screamed. But she kept going, drag by drag, inch by inch. Her breath stayed slow and controlled. No sound escaped her lips. She reached the doorway of the restroom and pulled herself in, finally. Slumping against the wall, she stayed there a long time, breathing through her nose, eyes shut. Her fingers curled and uncurled. Rage buzzed beneath her skin, but she didn't let it rise. She only let it settle, like weight pressing deep into her core, adding to something larger. Something building. No one saw her crawl. No one knew she made it back to class, with her chair reassembled, her face unreadable. She sat through the final bell in silence. When she got home, the world had already gone quiet. Streetlights blinked. One by one, the sky turned purple, then black. And behind her house, in the shadows of a converted garage, she began her real work. The space was small, unfinished, concrete floor, bare walls, a single bulb overhead. But in the center of the room hung a heavy punching bag. Old, cracked, wrapped in duct tape at the seams, wheeled herself into place before it adjusted. The brakes, and wrapped her wrists tightly with black cloth. Her movements were practiced, mechanical. Then she began. The first punch was slow, deliberate. The next faster. Then a flurry controlled, brutal. Her arms moved like pistons, her back straightened, core tight. Every strike echoed in the garage like distant thunder. She switched stances, spun the chair with sharp precision, elbowed, blocked, jabbed. Her breathing matched each hit short, efficient exhalations. Sweat dripped down her temple, catching the light. She didn't look angry, not even frustrated. Her face held a calm intensity, like a surgeon at work. Precision, rhythm, purpose. When her arms began to shake, she switched to defensive forms, blocking imaginary opponents, twisting in place, ducking invisible strikes. Her fingers snapped into shapes that showed years of training perfect form in every movement. The chair wasn't a cage, it was a weapon. It turned with her, followed her intent, part of her flow. She kept going long after the bulb flickered. Long. After her arms ached. Long after the night swallowed the sound of her fury. And when she finally stopped, the bag still swayed before her like it feared her touch. She unwrapped her wrists, rolled back, and sat in the darkness. Breathing, listening. Her fingers drummed the armrest slowly at school. They laughed, they mocked, they thought she was weak. Helpless. Stuck. But here, in the dark, she knew something they didn't. They had no idea what kind of fire they were lighting, and when it was ready, it would burn through everything. The third day began with rain, soft, cold, and lingering like a mood no one wanted to name. She arrived early, wheeling through the puddle-soaked pavement toward the school library, her hood pulled low over her head, her sleeves slightly damp. Most students avoided the library that early in the morning, but she liked it. It was quiet, still a place where she could disappear among shelves instead of stairs. She navigated through rows of history books and biographies, settling near a back table with a clear view of the door. She unpacked her notebook, sliding out a length of thick black cord she often fidgeted with, looping it between her fingers, tying and untying it with silent precision. A voice interrupted the calm. "That's a martial arts knot." It came from a boy, thin glasses slipping down his nose, books clutched to his chest like armor. He wasn't mocking. He was curious. The wrist strap knot, right? Like from Okinawan styles. She paused for a moment, eyes scanning his, calculating. Then, without a word, she slowly tucked the cord back into her pocket and returned to her notes. He lingered, unsure. "You practice?" I asked again, softer this time. She looked at him once, just once, and shook her head. Not enough to dismiss him entirely, but enough to end the conversation. He walked away, muttering something about how cool it would have been. She stared after him a moment longer, then lowered her gaze. She hadn't lied exactly. Not really. Not anymore. But in her mind, memories still lived like smoke flickering. Intangible, but alive. There was a time before all of this. Before the accident, before the chair, when her name meant something in certain circles. Small regional tournaments, backwater competitions, old wooden gyms with scuffed mats and eager eyes. She'd been fast, too fast for most to block. Her hands had moved like shadows, her eyes like stone. When she'd taken the final round of the Southern Regional Championships, she hadn't smiled. She'd bowed, black belt crisp at her waist, the medal resting on her chest like it belonged there. Her coach had called her a prodigy. Her parents had cried.
Ow.
She'd believed back then that this would be her path, a future built from discipline. In flame, then came the crash, the screech of tires, the shattering of glass. In silence, the wheelchair wasn't a symbol of her defeat. It was just the next version of her body. But to the world, the belt had disappeared with her legs. To them, strength couldn't look like this. They were wrong later that day. In the cafeteria, the boy from the library passed by her table and looked down. He didn't say anything. But he noticed something small tied to the back of her chair, nearly hidden under her bag straps. A black belt, worn, frayed, but folded neatly in a practice knot. His eyes widened slightly. Then he moved on, saying nothing. After school, she didn't head home. Instead, she turned the opposite direction, toward a narrow street lined with laundromats and storage garages. Down one cracked alley, behind a rusted dumpster and across from a forgotten vending machine, stood the back entrance to a dojo. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. She positioned herself near the wall, under the broken light. From there, she could hear everything: the shouts of students training, the slap of bare feet on mat, the thud of bodies hitting the floor. She closed her eyes and listened. Each sound matched a movement in her mind. She breathed with the rhythm. She moved with it. In the shadows, she practiced alone. Her wheels spun in tight arcs as her upper body snapped into practiced forms, blocks, strikes, controlled counters. Her hands were fast, decisive. She whispered kayas beneath her breath, just loud enough to keep time. Every pivot was clean. Every punch followed through with brutal precision. The chair didn't slow her. It adapted to her, became her. She was a student of silence, not of control, of patience, of watching. But she wasn't alone. Lurking. A few yards away, hidden poorly behind trash bins, two of her tormentors watched. Phones out, recordings rolling. They snickered with quiet glee, capturing the sight of her moving alone in what they assumed was fantasy. One zoomed in while the other whispered, "What is this? Kung Fu in a wheelchair? She thinks she's in?" A movie. They posted it online by sunset, captioned it with laughing emojis and hashtags like #chairfu and #SheThinksSheBruce Lee. The video spread faster than whispers. At first, it drew mockery, then confusion. Some saw the focus in her eyes and asked questions. Others dismissed it entirely. But she didn't check the comments. She didn't respond. She didn't flinch. That night, she returned to the alley, again and again, for hours. She practiced under the flickering light as the wind pushed garbage through the street. On the brick wall was long, powerful, moving in silence. She paused only once, looking at her own reflection in the dark window of the dojo. She spoke aloud, so quiet it nearly disappeared in the breeze. "They think it's a dream," she said. Then her eyes narrowed, shoulders squaring, fists tightening once again. "They have no idea." The day of the school talent show arrived with banners in the halls, flashing lights in the auditorium, and music echoing through the corridors. Everyone seemed distracted, buzzing with excitement, except her. She kept to herself, as always, rolling through the crowd with eyes down, trying to avoid the flurry of movement. But something felt off. Too many people were looking at her, smirking in ways she recognized. There were whispers trailing behind her like smoke. Even the teachers looked amused, as if they were in on some private joke. She could feel it. The setup. The auditorium filled quickly. Lights dimmed. Spotlight hit the stage. One by one, students came up singing off-key, juggling, awkwardly reading poetry. The crowd laughed, clapped, shifted in their seats. Then, without warning, the MC leaned into the mic, reading the next name. Her name, loud, clear, full of false excitement. The spotlight swung across the dark rows and landed on her, stunned in the audience. For a split second, the entire room held its breath. She froze, confused, wheels unmoving. The MC smiled, feigning warmth. Everyone give it up for our martial arts superstar." Laughter erupted from the back. The bullies who signed her up stood, mock, bowing in her direction. One of them waved his arms dramatically and shouted, "Show us the move, sensei." Her heart pounded. Someone behind her pushed lightly on her chair, guiding her toward the ramp. She didn't resist yet. The room stretched around her, eyes multiplying, becoming one huge sneering face. She rolled up the ramp under blazing lights, hands trembling slightly on the rims. On stage, they had prepared a fake demonstration. Two of the boys joined her, one pretending to be her assistant, the other playing the villain. They exaggerated every motion. The villain danced around, yelling "Hiya" like an old cartoon, while the assistant wheeled her back and forth like a prop. Her stomach turned. The audience howled. When she didn't perform, they grabbed her arms gently, raising them in the air like a puppet. She yanked them back. The assistant laughed and whispered, "Come on, it's just a joke." Her face stayed blank, her breath slow, but her eyes, they began to burn. A teacher stood at the side of the stage, smiling. No one stopped it. They ended the act with a dramatic spin of her chair and a mock bow. The spotlight dimmed. She rolled off stage to a mix of claps, confused silence, and pockets of laughter. Someone shouted, "Oscar-worthy." Another yelled, "Bruce Wheelie." She said nothing. She didn't cry, didn't rush. But the hallway outside the auditorium felt different as she emerged into it. Empty, quiet. Her face was still blank. No longer numb. Her shoulders dropped, her fists closed. Something inside her had reached its limit. Her right hand shot up, grabbing his wrist mid-motion. Her left pressed against the rim of the wheel, anchoring her. With a twist and shift, she pivoted the chair just enough to redirect his momentum, locking his arm down against the siderist. Her fingers squeezed desperately, firmly pinching the nerve in his wrist. He gasped, not from surprise but pain. Real pain. His knees buckled. He tried to jerk away. Couldn't. Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice was low, calm, deadly. "I told you," she said, tightening just slightly. "I'm not helpless." Then she released him. He stumbled backward, clutching his arm. No one else was there. No camera, no audience. Just him, breathing hard, eyes wide, staring at someone he no longer recognized. She turned without a word and wheeled herself out of the gym. Behind her, the gym felt different now, like the air had changed, like something had been broken and something else forged in its place. The boy limped through the school hallway, arms stiff at his side, a dark bruise blooming beneath his sleeve. When people asked what happened, he brushed it off, said he slipped in the gym, but the lie didn't sit right. His friends pressed him for more, and eventually he cracked, muttering something about the girl in the chair. They laughed at first thought. He was joking. The laughter faded when they saw he wasn't. No one wanted to believe it. A wheelchair girl? Doing what? The rumors began slowly, curling through the school like smoke from a quiet fire. Then came the video. Grainy security footage. Uploaded from a nearby business camera aimed at the back alley of the dojo, time-stamped late at night. It caught her. Alone, under the flickering alley, light striking, pivoting, moving with precision no one could fake. Her arms blurred. Her focus was surgical. Even in a chair, her form was clean, controlled chaos. There were no theatrics, no posturing. Just mastery in motion. The video hit the local forums first. Then TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, hashtags began to climb. Hashtag DOJO Ghost, hashtag Wheel Warrior, hashtag Real Strength. A slow silence descended on the school, not the silence of indifference, but of collective recalibration. Everyone suddenly realized what they had ignored, what they'd mocked, what they'd underestimated. She didn't speak about it. Not once. In the cafeteria, she sat in her usual corner, rolling slowly up to her usual table. But this time, no one blocked her path. No one laughed. Eyes followed her, wary, uncertain. Conversations dipped in volume when she passed. Friends nudged each other and whispered, Some looked away. Others stared too long. But she remained unreadable, neither smug nor shy. Still, she heard the word trained 3 times that day. Once in the stairwell, once in science class, once from a teacher who thought she couldn't hear. But she heard everything now. Everyone had grown quiet. Careful by the lockers, a younger student approached a first-year girl with tangled braids and nervous hands. She hesitated before speaking. "Is it true?" she asked. "The video. Is that really you?" The girl didn't answer, just looked down. The younger one leaned closer. "Can you teach me?" A pause, long one. "No," the girl said softly, not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't ready. Not yet. That evening, the sky stretched wide and purple above the city. She didn't go home after school. Instead, she rolled straight to the alley behind the dojo, her usual sanctuary. But something was different now. The shadows no longer felt lonely. They felt like armor. She parked beneath the half-lit bulb, slipped off her bag, and unzipped it. Inside, a hand wrap coiled and waiting. Her black belt, 2 bricks, a faded notebook. One by one, she laid them out like ritual. Then she wrapped her hands slow, deliberate. Like a monk preparing for a final kata, the heavy bag hung from a rusted bracket. She locked her wheels and began. The hits were harder now, sharper. The rhythm was cleaner, tighter, more brutal. 1, 2. Elbow, shoulder, turn, parry, pivot. She worked her arms past exhaustion, muscles screaming. Her chair shifted with each strike, rolling in precise micro-movements like an extension of her own balance. She set up the bricks, placed them carefully on the crate beside her. Her breathing slowed. She focused, cracked. Her elbow came down clean, splitting the brick in half with a controlled downward strike. Dust scattered into the night. Sweat dripped down her temple. Her breath returned to normal. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She went back to the bag. Hours passed. The alley darkened. A dog barked somewhere far off. Car backfired down the street. None of it mattered. Her focus was absolute. In between combinations, she murmured something under her breath, too quiet for most to hear. "Let them watch," she said. "Strike breath. This time. Spin, hit, block, elbow, they'll learn." It started like a joke. That's how they always start. A school spirit daystreamers fluttering, music blaring from cheap speakers, students in matching colors spilling across the yard. Someone had brought a megaphone. Someone else had brought the attitude, and someone had made a plan. The same bullies now desperate to reclaim the attention they'd lost. The spotlight they no longer owned. One of them stood on the bleachers, calling out with exaggerated glee, "We've got a very special demo for you all today." Laughter scattered. Some laughed. Some didn't. Most waited phones already. In hand, she was by the far edge of the yard, near the shade of the flagpole, quiet, unreadable as always. She heard her name called louder this time, amplified through the megaphone like a bad memory being broadcast for all to hear. They challenged her. "A friendly demo," they said. "No harm, just fun." But everyone watching knew the truth. It wasn't about fun. It was about power, image, shame. She looked at them from across the yard. No words, no reaction. But then she rolled forward. It was a long, quiet path through the middle of the crowd. The students parted as she passed, unsure of what they were about to witness. Some smirked, others whispered, many just recorded, but her eyes never left the challengers. 3 of them, the loudest ones. The same boys who had pushed, mocked, laughed, now waiting at the center of the yard, bouncing on their feet like amateur fighters in a playground ring. She came to a stop a few feet away, positioned her chair slowly, deliberately, locked the wheels, checked her gloves. The crowd formed a circle, instinctively pulling back. Teachers lingered nearby, confused but curious. No one stopped it. The first boy lunged forward dramatically, pretending to go for a harmless grab. He was mocking her again, but slower, this time hesitating. That's when her hand moved. She caught his wrist midair, twisted gently, rolled backward, and used his own motion to pull him off balance. He fell with a thud. She didn't even look at him as he groaned, The second one rushed in, more serious now, trying to corner her from behind. She ducked, hooked her elbow behind his knee, and swept it forward. He collapsed forward, stunned, face down in the grass. Still, not a single punch had landed. Only control. Only technique. The crowd began to murmur and cheer. The last one hesitated. He looked around at the phones, the teachers, the rising sound of awe. She gave him nothing but silence. And that silence broke him. He didn't even charge. He backed away, red-faced, muttering excuses. She released the locks on her wheels and turned slowly to face the crowd. Her breath was even, her eyes still calm. The teacher stepped in then, too late. One began to say something but stopped. Another just stared. There was nothing to punish. No rule broken. It's no fight, only skill, discipline, mastery, and the truth. Of everything they had ignored, the students weren't quiet. Now they were chanting, not mockingly, not as a joke, but with something new in their voices. Respect. She rolled past them without smiling, without pausing. But just before she disappeared, from the circle, she turned her head slightly. Strength isn't about standing tall, she said, voice clear. It's about rising when no one believes you can. Then she was gone. The crowd stood still for a long moment. The cheers faded. Phones lowered. The schoolyard suddenly didn't feel like a place for cruelty anymore. Later, in the locker room. Hallway, long after the Spirit Day games ended and the noise drifted into memory, her locker stood open. Inside, hung with careful reverence, was a black belt. Faded, frayed, earned. No one touched it. No one spoke. They just looked. And for the first time truly looked,